Hi everyone, this week we're talking about the 1700s and the art movement known as Rococo. And during this time period, as you can see from the map I'm showing you, colonization of the Americas is going strong. So we have the British colonies, we have the French colonies or territory, and the Spanish. This is definitely influencing what's happening in Europe because the European nations are growing very wealthy from this colonization. So Rococo. It's kind of like Baroque that we looked at last week, but on a much smaller scale and more intimate scale. Oops. For example, if you remember from last week, I showed you Versailles and the Hall of Mirrors. Well, this certainly is not on the scale of Versailles, but it may be maybe as, let's say, elaborate or decorative as Versailles in a way. We have lots of gold leafing here. We have a really fantastic chandelier here, lots of natural light, mirrors in the large mirror here. So Rococo is definitely, like I said, mimicking Baroque. One thing that you'll notice about the Rococo is lots of pastel colors that are being used. So we have lots of blues and pinks and yellows, and it's really the style of the aristocrat. So those people that have made a lot of money off of colonization or off of the merchant trade because of colonization, they have the money to make these very elaborate homes or have portraits painted of them, things of this nature. So here I'm showing you a painter, Watteau, and this by far is one of the most famous of the Rococo painters. And here I'm showing you, it's the island of where supposedly Venus was born. So it's like the island of love, you can think of it as. And you first will notice like nothing is crisp and clean like with the Baroque painting that we looked at last week where everything was so precise. Here we have more of what we could say is a ethereal view where we have kind of, brushwork that we can definitely see by the artist, blending colors, and again, more on the pastel side, although this one in particular has a bit of brown in it. But a lighter, more pastel in general. So we can read this by saying that these couples have come to this island of love. And we have this first couple here who they're just courting. They're just beginning to date. So she sits here and he's trying to woo her, trying to get her to like him. We move forward and now they are in a relationship. She takes a little stumble and he catches her. And in the last one, they look back. She looks back, kind of recalling the courtship here. As we go down the hill here, we have people that are getting onto this boat. And here we have Cupid, little cherubs up here. So all telling about this concept of these people being in love, like the island of love. So the other thing about this work, the Rococo work, is it's for the wealthy. It doesn't really concern itself with any kind of political or heavy message in any way. It's all about love and spending money and having a good time, really. The next one you'll see is the piece by Fragonard, The Swing, from 1767. And here we have this young lady and she is swinging, and you see that this man is actually has ropes and he's pulling her. So she's saying to him, make me go higher, pull me faster. So this guy's pulling her faster, perhaps a servant or something like that. And she goes faster and faster and she flings her shoe off here, and down below is her lover hiding in the bushes. And she does this so that he can see up her skirt. So again, it was, this kind of risque time period as far as the concept of like the aristocracy. And here we have a Cupid statue, puts his finger to its lips to say, be quiet, don't let anybody know about this. And again, you see the pastel colors being used, the blues and the pinks and the yellows, and the brush work that is done is not crisp, clean brush work like we've seen before. It's kind of hazy, you know, like I said before, like ethereal. And this brings us to another idea at this time, which is moralizing narrative portraits. And this is happening at the very beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we have people moving from the farms, moving from the agrarian way of life into the cities and taking up the urban way of life. So here we have a painting by Hogarth, and here we have kind of just the opposite of the last two I showed you, which dealt with love. Here we have probably these two people that despise each other. These two people are being betrothed. They are to get married. And here are their fathers who are figuring out a contract, more or less, of the marriage. This guy here, the one father, he holds the family tree to show, oh, yes, my child is from such good lineage. We have all these ancestors that are so important, blah, blah, blah. And he's looking at this, and they're trying to figure out, you know, some kind of dowry probably for the daughter. And then, like I said, they really are not interested in each other. They do not want to get married. It's all in a marriage of convenience. They're going to merge their wealth together, and this is why they're doing it. His foot is bandaged probably because he's been eating too many things that have cream and heavy kinds of food like this, and he most likely has something called gout, which is if you eat very rich foods, you end up getting this autoimmune problem, since he is kind of fat. And then you have the two dogs, which dogs are usually fidelity, you know, they're symbolizing fidelity, but you'll notice that one is sleeping and one is kind of looking the other way, and yet they're chained to each other, kind of symbolizing the way this marriage is, that they're not engaged with one another, they're just being chained to one another. And I put this one in because I'd like to show this. It's by a famous person named Wedgwood, and you might have heard of Wedgwood china. It's very good, expensive china. Well, during this time period, we were at 1787, there was a big move in England to support the emancipation of slavery, or the emancipation of slaves, I should say, the ending, the abolishment of slavery. So this piece was actually given to Benjamin Franklin, who would often come to France and to England. And here we have a piece by Joseph Wright, and we have this very interesting thing. We have an experiment here that's taking place. And so in here we have a bird, and the bird unfortunately is going to die because they're cutting off the oxygen through an air pump to see what happens to the bird. And you can see the small children in distress because they see what is happening to the bird, that the bird is going to die, right? But this is a time of great experimentation and great understanding of these new laws of science and the world around them really changing, and what we call the Enlightenment. So this was helping to really move that forward, things like this, these experiments. So that's what's being shown here. Notice the really dramatic light in this, and the shadows. And my eye is always going to this young girl who looks in such distress at the fact that this bird has just been killed. So our next artist here is Angelica Kauffman, and she was a superb painter, as you can tell. But she was one of the only women at the time period that was allowed to study at the academy. Very few women at the time were allowed to. But when she had been accepted to the academy, she'd gone to school, she was really renowned for her painting, and yet, because she was a woman, she was only allowed to do portraiture and still life paintings. And she never was able to do the big historic paintings where actually one could make a decent living. So she was hired to paint this image of this mother and her children, and so what she did is she decided to put them in clothing so that they looked like they were Roman, and in that way, even though she's painting these contemporary people, she is making them kind of like a historic painting. And so that was her way around that rule of not being allowed to paint historic paintings. And also, she wasn't allowed to paint these giant paintings. That was the other thing. Historic paintings were really large in size. She's not allowed to do that. So this is 40 inches by 50 inches. So not that big in comparison to something like Rembrandt's Night Watchman, that's like 11 feet by 10 feet. And with this, we'll end up jumping over to the Americas and to Philadelphia, so I will stop here.